ahead. Let's get started.
Do you want to do the pledge and stuff?
We hadn't.
Not for a workshop.
It's not a workshop.
It's official meeting.
Oh. But we can, yes. It's not on the agenda, but we can. Please stand and join me in the invocation and the pledge. Heavenly Father, we thank you again for this opportunity to come and assemble, Lord, in this free country that we have here. God, I pray that you just give us wisdom, Lord, that we do your will and not ours, Father, and that you grant each one up here a special dose of wisdom tonight, God, to look through all this and to know that what we're about to do is going to impact all of our citizens, God, not just a few. And God, Father, I just pray that wisdom upon us now. Lord, we ask these things in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
We'll do the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Now we're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a special meeting that was scheduled and called for the purpose of conducting a public hearing and consideration of adopting a proposed ordinance which would amend Ordinance 1114, which concerns the public service tax. On June 21st, the board adopted Ordinance 11-14, which imposed a public service tax of 10% on every purchase of electricity, metered or bottled gas, fuel, oils, and water in the county. After some subsequent discussion at a budget workshop in August, the board directed staff to schedule another public hearing and bring back a proposed amendment to lower the tax rate from the previously approved 10% down to 7%, and to also lower the exemption on the first 500 kilowatt hours per residential dwelling unit. So this is a public hearing, and the proposed ordinance is attached as the only exhibit, and Will is able to address any revenue generation questions that the board may have.
Okay. I have the board want to have your say, and then we hear the public, or we want to hear the public and then we'll talk? How do you want to?
I wanted to say something along the larger thing. You know, we're here because of the budget, really. This is to support the budget. I sat down with Will and went over the numbers from the budget year we're in now to the budget year we're proposing, and even with the 10%, which this budget is based on, correct, Will? Even with the 10% tax, our local revenues are down 1.2 million. And that's not just from property taxes going down. That's also because we're not taking money out of the reserve to spend, and we're not skimming, for lack of a better term, money off of the road department, solid waste department, the wastewater department. We know those are all in trouble anyway. Just for example, this past year, transfer from Fund 160, what is that, Will?
Road department.
Road department, this budget year transferred $80,000 out of the road department to help support the general fund. And this budget we're proposing, it's zero. And you know, the only reason I'm saying this because these things didn't add up in my mind. You know, I look at all these things about revenue neutral, and well, the property taxes went down this much, but you're raising taxes this much. That's not really the only facet of the story. There's really three facets. The property values have gone down. We're not taking any more money out of the reserve to prop up the budget, and we're not transferring money from other departments to support our budget. That's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but that's one of the reasons the road department's in trouble, because we've been taking money from them to support the general fund, which is to support ambulance, sheriff. I mean, it's not supporting just the board, it's supporting all the other departments. I think it's really important. That's the figure that sticks out in my mind. Even with the tax, the local revenues that we use to run our government are down $1.2 million from this year to next year, and we have made up that $1.2 million in cuts. We've cut $1.1 million. It's just roughly what I come up with, but obviously they have to equal. So I just wanted to make that point. Those numbers are buried in there, and it's just intuitively kind of hard to see.
Okay. Then you got to add to that?
Yeah,
I'll make some comment.
I mean, we're going to listen to the citizens at some point, but we just
Okay.
got to make our mind up tonight what we want this thing to end up being.
Okay. Well, first, I just want to acknowledge everybody on this board is extremely aware of how terrible the economy is and how a lot of people are struggling. I myself am having trouble paying some of my bills. So, you know, we're in a very difficult situation because the county's finances are not in good shape. And we're responsible for making sure that we balance the budget and provide needed services for people. And people really do need and value our services. Every time we talk about trying to cut something, we have a group of people who come and scream or cry or whatever, telling us, please don't cut this, don't cut this. So, and we have been making cuts. I mean, we've made huge cuts, and we keep trying to find more places to cut. It's a terrible time. It's not easy at all. And one of the things that I think, besides making cuts and trying to balance our budget, that I hope people understand that we're trying to do is we're also trying to diversify our revenue sources and shift away from property taxes to the extent that we can to other types of assessments, fees that we think are more fair and also maybe more stable over the long term. And one of the reasons, so we're focused tonight on the public service tax, but our goal as a board over the long term is to try to reduce our property taxes in part by putting in some taxes like this, where people pay just a little bit over the year and get to keep the services that they value, whether it's fire and whether it's EMS, whether it's the library, whether it's veteran services or whatever. So one of the things I like about this tax compared to property taxes, this is a tax you can do something to reduce. It's in your control by trying to reduce your electricity use and your water use to actually reduce this tax. That's one of the reasons that we have our utility providers out in the lobby, is because they can help people do that. We also have weatherization programs to help people. We've talked about a hardship exemption for real low-income people. There are utility assistance programs. So the most vulnerable populations, I think there are ways to help them with this particular tax. And everybody, it's within their power to actually lower their utility use and reduce the impact of this tax. That's not true for property taxes. They're really, you know, when you get your property tax bill, there's not very many easy ways to lower that. And if you don't pay it, there are really severe consequences. Now, I know our tax collector, Cheryl Lola, works with people, but, you know, you're at risk of losing your house. So between looking at property taxes versus this kind of a public service tax, I think I personally, and I think this board has stated previously, we would like to see us moving more toward this kind of thing and away from, you know, to lower the property taxes. And I think that sometimes doesn't get heard.
Okay. Anybody else at this point? We got any citizens to be heard? I'm not going to beg y'all, so I'm going to talk. Hey, Ralph Thomas.
Good evening. Ralph Thomas, 637 Hunters Trace. I appreciate the tough position you guys are in. I certainly do. You know, I don't envy it, and I know that you're trying to do the best you can. The citizens are forced to tighten their belt. They're forced. They just don't have the ability to go back to the well or print more money like our federal government does or raise taxes. You know, frustration is an all-time high at the federal level, at the state level. I mean, that just means that politicians are just absolutely out of step with the will of the people. And we have hope that our local folks who live with us, who pay the same taxes, who deal with the same challenges, are not in the same camp as the state and the national level. And we hope that you can understand that and you can get that, you know, when you've got people that are already taxed, you know, physically and to the breaking point, adding more tax on them does not solve a problem. That means that you just don't quite get it, that you're at that breaking point. You're at that last straw. You know, it's not the whole bundle that breaks the camel's back. It's that last straw, and that's kind of where we're at right now. I agree with Commissioner Arts. I think this tax is a better tax than putting it against the properties, because there's the inequity of the Save Our Homes and the homestead exemptions, and there's, you know, I think it spreads it around, and so I'm for that part of it, but I see it, and I think the people see it as, let's max this one out, we max this one out. That's what we think politicians do. Let's just grab everything we can get, and citizens will just have to deal with it. You know, if we could put that tax in place but make it revenue neutral, then it does make sense. I think it makes sense at that point. You know, there's going to always be winners and losers, but I think overall it does make sense, and I'm for that. Revenue neutral. Everyone talks about what does that mean? Well, I'm going to tell you what it means to the citizens, to the taxpayers, to the voters. What it means to them is, how much am I paying? How much is it going to cost me? That's what they're looking at. You know, we've got money that comes from all kind of sources. Racetrack fees, all kind of crazy fees that the majority of citizens don't even know about and don't care about. All they care about is, how much are you going to charge me for what I'm getting? And at this point, a lot of us are willing to probably deal with a little less services just because we can't afford to make those extra payments. So I just hope that you'll strongly consider that. And like I said before, personally, I'm okay with it going to 10% if you'll take it back to true revenue neutral from a taxpayer standpoint. I think that's what the people need. I think that's what the people want. And I think this and your budget meeting that's coming up in the next couple of weeks, I think these are going to be defining moments of whether or not you guys are on the side of the people or you're just like the rest of the politicians that we've come to expect. Thank you.
Thank you. Dana Peck.
My name's Dana Peck, 2481 Surf Road. I'm here because of the inexplicable kick you seem to be on to raise taxes on everything that's moving and perhaps everything that is standing still. And you're raising them to astronomical rates. If you want to play word games with those rates and say, oh, we're reducing it to 7% instead of raising it to 10%, play what you will. 7% is astronomical for any tax at all. You want to raise tax on electric, gas, water, communications, cell phones, garbage, I mean, name it. There it is. And why do you want to do this? You want to do it because in spite of your hand-wringing and your whining and your gee whiz, we've looked so hard and worked so hard, there is a way to reduce this tax, and you ignore it. You give 2 out of every 3 property tax dollars in this county to the sheriff. You are willing to say to the property appraiser, the clerk of courts, the tax collector, the supervisor of elections, you squeeze and squeeze hard, get rid of employees. We don't value their employment. But boy, by golly, you do not look at the sheriff's budget. I'm here to say and suggest that you could cut $2 million from the sheriff's budget and not hurt law enforcement at all. And you wouldn't know the answer to that because you don't examine it. You just turn it over. The people of this county should be your priority, not the sheriff, who I guess you believe has so much power. It's he who you depend on to put you in office or kick you out. I can tell you that the sheriff, after he had his bad accident and hit the woman parked in the driveway with her child. Went out and bought a spiffy new truck. And it cost probably the equal amount to the taxes, property taxes, that 50 families pay in this county. And you don't want to touch his budget, you don't blink an eye. And if buying one shiny new truck isn't enough, he went out and bought a shiny new one for Major Maurice Langston, who I guess drives his truck to and from work. Certainly not on patrol and law enforcement. He took the truck, the shiny new truck, that the families in this county are buying for him. These families, that many of them are suffering now 3% reductions in their income because they work for the state. And if 2 trucks weren't enough, then he bought 3. Another for his deputy chief, Donnie Crum, who took the truck, to drive back and forth to home when he comes to the office. So just for starters, you could say, hey, Sheriff, let's whack out $2 million from your budget. You say, oh, impossible. I don't think so. The sheriff has a top-heavy administration, high-paid brass. Wakulla County has 30,000 people in it. Leon County has 300,000 people in it. This county has more high-paid top brass than Leon County. Think about it. I am here because you failed the people, and I hope you use your heads and stop failing them.
Thank you. John Nichols?
Thank you. I'm John Nichols. I'm Director of Operations over at St. Mark's Powder, St. Mark's. I want to thank you for allowing me to come talk to you. I think I've talked to each one of you individually about this tax, and I guess I get a chance to talk to you collectively and remind you that this tax at 10% will hit St. Mark's Powder to the tune of $400,000. I think that surprised everybody. It didn't surprise me, but it is quite a chunk of change. The very statute that allows you to pass this tax also allows you to pass industrial exemptions, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about. I don't know if that can be done at this meeting. I talked to Commissioner Brock about that a little bit earlier, but $400,000 to St. Mark's Powder is going to mean several jobs, and those people are going to be out of work. And I appreciate the revenue problem you do have. We all face this in business. The problem is the erosion of your tax base. This tax can further erode that base if we're not careful with it. We're going to lose people. I'm going to have to make cuts just like you have to make cuts, and it's going to put people on the street. It's funny, the last time I went through an energy audit that had to do with a tax was back in June of 1998. And at that time, the state of Florida allowed us a tax exemption, a tax credit for energy use in manufacturing that employed people and kept them at work. We're full circle now. I appreciate your time. I understand the problem. The revenue, I heard you say, but there would be maybe a discussion on the total revenue this would generate. The last numbers I saw, I think were in the paper, approximately 25 to 33% of the revenue numbers I've seen would fall on one taxpayer, that's St. Mark's Powder. So we think that's excessive, and would appreciate you considering the statute that does allow exemptions for manufacturing by certain SIC codes, which we do qualify under that statute. So thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you, sir. Bill May?
Good evening. I'm Bill May. I'm here representing Talcon Electric Cooperative. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you briefly tonight. I understand the tough position you're in. Talcon would just like to be on record as stating that it is our position that we feel that any charge that appears on a monthly utility bill should be directly related to the cost of service. And for our members, we want them to understand that we didn't ask for this tax. We do not benefit from this tax, but we recognize the counties, as a charter county, their ability to pass the tax, and if they do so, we will be obligated to collect and remit it to the county. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Donna Sanford?
Well, I do not like any new tax. And I especially do not like it when you cannot, as a commissioner, explain to me how it's going to affect my electric bill. And I spoke with Mr. Brock, and he was very honest with me. He could not tell me what would be charged, the 10 or the 7%. But it's like you didn't do your research ahead of time. Is my customer charged just for being a Progress Energy customer with no kilowatts involved? Is that going to be taxed? I understand my energy, where I actually use the kilowatts, that's going to be taxed. The fuel charge, I do not understand that is being taxed at all. But here you have imposed a new tax, it's already in force, and you didn't research what would actually be affected and what would be taxed on my electric bill, and could not answer my question when I went to you. I'm also concerned that we spent the $1.4 million of cash for the community center that's not being used. I ask, why do we need a new tax? I was told that we need a new tax because the property taxes we didn't increase your property tax, Ms. Sanford. We need this for services and lawsuits.
Okay. Commissioner, anything else?
I have a question for our attorney. When we're talking about St. Mark's Powder, if our revenues were to come in above what we expect, could we go back and recapture their losses? Let's just call their tax, let's call that a loss for them. If our revenues come in after whatever we do here, could we recapture that and
pay the money back to them?
well, let's forget about paying it back. Let's just say that 2 months from now we see that we could do without their money on an ongoing basis. Could we just stop at that time the collection, or half of it, or 3/4 of it?
You can at any time authorize an exemption. He's correct. There is a specific exemption for industrial uses, and you would do that based upon the SIC codes, and I believe yours is gunpowder. So you could do an exemption for gunpowder manufacturing. However, the only constraint you have is that that would have to be an advertised ordinance amendment, public hearing, 120 days notice to DOR, and then it goes into effect the first date of any calendar quarter.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about. If we were to see our revenue coming in, we can't ever expect businesses to come to town when we're taxing one of the very few businesses we have. If I were a business, I would look somewhere else, because this is the #1 employer who's been here for years and years and years. Almost everybody in the county's worked for them at one time or another, and we're going to tax them because we can't balance our own budget. We're going to go after their budget. Whatever we do is probably going to be a tax on you tonight, sir. But my thought is that if we see that our revenue is coming in, I personally would want his accommodated first to take him out of the revenue stream.
You can lower the tax rate on that specific use. It requires an ordinance.
I would agree with that. I think I brought St. Mark's Powder when we first started having this discussion about them being reduced. Because of jobs, local job.
I would also like to say that I agree with one of the speakers earlier. However this may go, my position has been from the very start that if it's not revenue neutral, I don't want any part of it, and that's the way I'll vote. But one thing that this does, if we can get it revenue neutral, right now half of our county is not paying taxes. We have probably, maybe I'm exaggerating, but there's a large percentage of people that are not paying taxes. If we can get this thing revenue neutral, we can drop the ad valorem tax somewhat and offset that by the public services tax. It would spread it over to people who are not paying anything. And but my vote is going to be revenue neutral, and if it's not revenue neutral, I'm going to vote against it.
And just for clarification, Commissioner Moore, can you tell me what revenue neutral means to you? Because there's two interpretations of it going around.
Well, it drops the millage rate somewhere below 8.75.
I think we could set it, if we set it at 7, after talking to Will, with no exemptions, we could drop the millage rate to 8.65. That was the understanding that we had, based on the revisions to the Sheriff's Department jail bed revenue numbers. They're projecting an extra 250, which I think is pretty conservative. We could drop the millage rate some.
One of the things we've discussed a few times.
Go ahead.
One of the things that we've discussed a few times, and I want to reiterate, and I'm going to try and hopefully we can find something we can all agree on tonight. If we charge the 10% public services tax like we're charging now, and we lower the millage rate more, that still makes the most sense to me. If you charge the 10% public services tax with or without the exemptions, and whatever we can do to help lower the millage after that will help bring in steady income from new sources for the future. For instance, the issue we're dealing with is $1 that we brought in last year, property tax is worth 90 cents this year. Our property appraiser is guessing $1 brought in with property tax this year will be worth about 96 cents next year. But $1 brought in with the utility tax will be worth $1 next year. So we won't have to have the same budget adjustments that we're trying to go through this year. So that makes the most sense to me. And I thought,
I think it's too late to even consider that. I thought if we totally voted down this,
If you don't,
if we don't take action tonight, then it's back at 10%. Okay.
And we could, and tonight we can get rid of or leave in the exemption that we have in for residences. We can take that out tonight, or we can leave it in, which is a conversation. I've heard people argue both sides, and it makes sense. And at our, when we finally set the final millage, we'd have the ability to lower the millage then. So that's still an option before us.
Okay. Well, here's where I'm at, and I'm also going to reiterate it again, and I hope I can convince you guys to. I mean, we're at a crossroads in a place in the county that we've never been at, and I have lost a lot of sleep trying to figure out how to address this and make and I know I'm one vote, and I'm going to vote my conscience here because here's where I'm at, and I hope some of y'all will listen. Hope you're not so stubborn that you can't hear what I'm trying to say to you. What I have seen is that government over the past 6 or 8 years has absolutely grown out of control because we had a influx of money, and that's just the way government has always been. Do I agree with it? No, but it's what happened. So let's just understand that for a minute, that they got bigger over the last 5-6 years. Now, and the money was coming in with it, so those were kind of equal. Well, now the money fell, and government's still fat. It's big. While we did, I heard what you said, Randy, we cut a lot of money this year. Yes, we didn't cut enough, and that's where I'm at. Is that this has shrank so much that now we have got to shrink this, maybe, and I don't believe we got to do it all in 1 year, but we have got to shrink this side to start matching this that keeps shrinking. My issue is that, like I said the other night, we're all scared. I don't want to say scared, but we're concerned that if we tell a constitutional officer that any constitutional officer for that matter, including the board, that they got a cut, that's somehow bad. Well, it's not. It wouldn't be so bad if this number was still big over here, but this has stayed the same, and this number's gotten so much smaller. We got to change something, guys. And because government's grown out of control, not just at the county level, but at the state level and the federal level, and just like the speaker said earlier, it's time for us to take the action to change that. And if we don't do that, I can't sleep at night doing this to the people. I cannot. I mean, I can't think of reason why we even went to the maximum of 10%. I voted for it, and I ought to have my behind kicked, and now I've been trying to change it ever since because I misunderstood exactly what I was doing. That doesn't matter. I did it, and that's doesn't matter. Talk about the people. I agree this is a fair, flatter tax, but I've given that a lot of thought. And what I have a problem with is that the very people who can't afford tax are going to be the people who now get a tax, like my 82-year-old mother and all the other mothers like her and grandmothers out there in the community and retirees who live on a fixed income, who probably get the homestead exemption, and they've earned that over time because now they don't pay tax. And now, because we're going to sit up here and because we don't want to cut that fat government, now we're going to, I mean, all we're doing is balancing the budget with a new tax. This is a new tax. Call it what you want, but we don't go right to 10%. Why in the world would we go right to 10%? I keep hearing this resonating is, well, we can't fix it all in 1 year. That's what we're trying to do, is fix it all in 1 year, and we can't fix it all in 1 year. We got to go at this at a slow, methodical speed to fix this. You know what? Talking about the sheriff telling us that he's going to bring in more money, we're right back to what we did wrong last year and the year before, and that's balancing the budget on non-recurring funds. We can't do that. If we take that number and inflate it to whatever, and it may be that it comes in, but there's also a good chance that it's not going to come in because we have seen it happen to us. That's what eat us alive 2 years ago. Or 3 years, 3 years running that the jail bed revenue didn't come in. If that happens, and you guys max this 10% or even make it 7%, we're still. What are you going to do next year? We've already heard that the taxes are going to be less next year again. And then I hear this, y'all offering this, and I can't believe y'all are doing this because I'm sure the public is smarter than this. Is that y'all are offering to lower this ad valorem number and raise this to 10% and lower the ad valorem. You'd have to lower the ad valorem somewhere around 3 mils to equal what you're doing over here with this 10% PST. I figured it up. I figured up my electric bill and what you're going to take from me in my electric bill and what you're already doing to me for garbage. I'm saying you, us, what we're already doing everybody to garbage, what we're already doing for the fire MSBU, and the 3% cut that we've already taken. We're talking probably 3-4 mils of ad valorem tax is the equivalent to that, guys. I'm not going to go forward, and I hope that y'all will listen. I tried to compromise before and say let's do 5% with the 500. Now y'all talking about 10% without the 500 kilowatt reduction, and we're going to suck the industry's dry. Now you're talking about taking it off the industry tax. Now you got to go up to 10% to get it from the citizens, from the homeowners. Where does it stop? I mean, where does it stop? I'm tired of paying taxes. I got my paycheck today and I looked at it and I'm like, my God, this is ridiculous. We're killing people. We're robbing them. And I'm tired of doing it. I'm not going to do it anymore. I have always sat up here years and years and always said, we max out the MSBU. We were at the max at 10 mils for many years when I sat up here, even as a chairman then. And I thought we needed it. I thought we did the right thing then. I know now that, but money was coming in. We were working and we were improving things. We can't do it anymore. We got to say to everybody, you got to cut. You got to cut. And if we don't do that, I don't think we've done our job. Maybe they take us to the governor. Maybe the governor says, county, you got to pay it. I'm gonna turn around and I'll sit with the governor and I'll say, here, sir, you show me where you take it from. You show me. And I can't do this to people. I can't. I'll compromise somewhere in here. I'm still not going to feel good about that, but I am not. And I'm going to really be upset if we do 10% with no reduction. And then we also lower it off if we just put it on the back of the people and not business. I mean, that's crazy. I don't know how else to say it.
Well, at a budget meeting, Greg stood up here and told us what fiscal year's spending level this budget proposes. It was 05. So, you're right, government got fat during those last 5 years. We're back to 05, 06 spending levels in this budget, right?
Well, that's the 0506.
Operational spending levels are reduced to 05, 06 levels, which was, for lack of a better word, pre-Pingree. We did cut. We cut 1.1 million in cuts. 600,000 from the sheriff, I think 300-something thousand from us. Everybody's cut. Now, I'm not sitting here defending everybody. I agree. I hate paying taxes just as much as the next person. But we got to run this county, too. The jail bed revenue, we've always used that. And you're right, 3 or 4 years ago, it was $200,000 or $300,000 less than we projected. And we are kind of going out on a limb there. I agree with you. But it's based on year-to-date actual numbers. So I'm halfway comfortable with it. I mean, you're right. The Immigration Service could say no more, or we're going to cut your prisoners off. You're right. I agree with you 100% on that point. And the thing about next year, that you brought that point up too, I'd just like to respond to that too, is that next year, remember, we'll have a whole extra quarter of, if we do this tax, we're only budgeting 9 months worth, because we start January 1st. Next year, we'll have a full year's worth of this tax. It should more than offset any reduction in property taxes we receive, and hopefully next year we can cut some more. And we need to remember too that even though revenues have gone down, population has not gone down. Between 2000, I think, and 2010, the population grew 38%. Those people aren't moving away. They still want their road graded. They still want that burglar caught that stole their boat motor. They still want ambulance, fire. You know, we need to remember that there's still the same number of people we got to provide service for. And again, I mean, Mike, you and I haven't always agreed on everything, but we're all, whatever tax we do, we did it, not him or me. We did it.
I said we.
Okay.
And I said I voted for the 10% where we're at now. I disagree with it because. But let me respond to a couple of things you said there. You're right. We're back to the 5-6 budget year numbers, but government size hasn't changed. We're still trying to run that fat government with 5-6 funds, and it's not working. And that's why we've eat up all the reserve.
Explain to me what you're saying. I mean, we've cut people.
You said we're back to the 5-6 budget numbers,
right?
Okay,
spending numbers.
But we still got the government size at 10-11 budget year. We haven't cut that much, but we have. The county commission has.
Right. Okay.
And we've done our part.
Okay.
I'm just saying it's got to get beyond our doors. And I'm gonna take a beating, but I already have. And unfortunately probably lost some friendship over this, but that's not why I was elected. I was elected to tell you what I think, and the people are telling me, and apparently they're not telling y'all. Maybe I'm the only one getting emails and calls and people talking to me when I go everywhere I go in this county, is that I haven't had anybody come up to me and say, I hope to God y'all put that thing at 10%. Nobody's told me that, Randy, and I know. I can't believe that y'all been told that. Now, I know we got to make the hard decision, but I feel bad when I'm going to put all those folks that were sitting in this room the other night, those older folks that came here for another reason, those are the very, and I said that to them, those are the very people who are going to get hurt the worst because they're not paying significant amounts of tax now that now will be on a commodity that you have to have. You have to have electricity. You got to have water, and you got to have gas to cook with, and we're going to turn around and tax them.
I think, unfortunately, the can, for lack of a better word, got kicked down the road, and it's in our laps now. In the past, this board has spent its reserve down. One of them was the community center, of course. That took a big chunk.
Impact fee.
That was impact. Okay, I'll take that back then. All right. The reserve then, just if you look at the past year's budget, $800,000 this year, $300,000, and we're paying. It's not a sin, but this is paid forward to this day. We've got to start rebuilding our reserve. We've got to stop sucking money off other funds.
I agree, Randy. You've heard me. I agree with everything you just said.
And we
I'm
did
just
that.
disagreeing that we still got this level of government, and you're right. We're at 5-6, but we can't keep 5-6 level of size 10-11 government. That's got to go back too, and it's not receding back with. You see my point? This level of government's not going down to the 5-6 level. If we can get there, I'm with you. I'm ready to then, if we need a tax.
This level being people, you mean? Or,
Yes. Whatever.
the spending is down, but you're saying the people are still there.
No, I'm not saying that, because now you're making it sound like
No,
I'm
I
going to
don't-
get rid of people.
No,
I'm
no.
saying that do whatever you got to call it. I don't care how they squeeze it down. We got to squeeze this size of government down some more to match the 5-6 money. We can't keep it just driving the ship ahead, and the way we're going to balance the budget is on the back of the people with this is another new tax. Call it whatever you want, a flat tax. I don't care what you call it. Y'all can call it whatever you want. It's still a new tax. It's a new tax. A stinking federal government does it to us every day. They charge us a new tax, and then they color it up and call it something else. But by golly, at the end of the day, we're paying it.
I agree.
Every single one of us, and it's
State government.
it's wrong.
But yeah.
It's wrong. And if we're going to do it at this little local level, then we deserve the comments we get.
What is your solution then?
I offered up a compromise. I'm willing to do. I offered 5%, leave the 500 kilowatt reduction in. That was everybody thought that was too big a cut to everybody. So I was willing to compromise at 7% and the 500 kilowatt reduction. And let's debate what we need to. I'm not going to say zero to these, and I love St. Mark's powder to death, but I think there's got to be some compromise in there too. Maybe just the same amount, or I don't think 1% or 2%, but I mean it's got to be some number that's.
We can't offer an exemption for single.
But you're not cutting, Mike.
You can't. I thought you just said we could.
Not tonight. It's not been
Has to
advertised
come-
in this ordinance.
has to come back
Direction
for
was
another public
not
hearing.
given on that.
So what is theirs going to be at 10%?
Whatever the.
Whatever it's set at tonight.
I don't think anybody's set on 10%. When we left off, it was 7. And it sounds to me like we're talking about now is do the exemption or don't do the exemption.
That's my answer to you, Jerry.
You're working
between 5
yeah.
and 7.
Okay,
With a
but-
500 kilowatt reduction.
But you're working on you're not bringing the size of this government down, and you're not bringing the.
That will. Let me explain that. That's a good point. That will cause some further reductions to everybody if we do 5 or 7%. He's got the numbers. He can tell us, and I'll ask him to do that in just a second. At 5, it's X number, and at 7, it's X number. They still got to shrink. There's still going to be a cause for them to have to shrink their government.
That's fine, but I can't vote unless even that is neutral.
You're right. That's not neutral.
I can't do it.
5% is more neutral than anything, because if you factor in Randy's theory the other night about the rollback rate being equivalent to about 5% of a PST, I can buy that being revenue neutral.
May I ask one of my advisors a question?
Sure.
Mr. Ralph, would you come up to the podium, please? What does the 5% give us? Where can I get revenue neutral?
Yeah, the way I see it, if we do 5%, even with the 500 kilowatt exemption, if you left the millage the way it is now, that's good. That's a good point to be at, I believe.
Okay, but now let's stay on this a minute. And Will, what is the cut to each constant? What's the overall cut if we do 5% with a 500 kilowatt reduction? What's the still the cut to be done?
With the exemption,
I think it's 600,000.
$577,000.
Okay, so round it up to $600,000. That's what, and then you evenly proportion that out to all the constitutional officers. What is that? Can you tell us what that is to each one?
I think we saw those numbers.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure the public knows.
It's $300,000 to the sheriff, $12,000 to the clerk of court, $28,000 to the property appraiser, $20,000 to the tax collector, and then $10,000 to the supervisor of elections.
Now that's a significant cut, and in my mind that's revenue neutral. Now if we do 7%, just stay on that a minute, because I want to know what 7% does. The same scenario.
$346,000.
Okay.
The $124,000 to the BOCC, $179,000 to the sheriff, $7,000 to the clerk of court, 16,000 to the property appraiser, 12 to the tax collector, and 6 to the supervisor of elections.
And to me, Jerry, that is a fair compromise.
Okay, what about if you take the offset, the 500 kilowatt offset?
That includes the 500 kilowatt reduction.
If you don't do a 500
If
kilowatt hour
we-
exemption, we got to cut 127, but that's all of us. But that's before the revised jail bed revenue.
Guys, let's don't put that in the equation. It's a non-recurring fund. We can't. That's like using. That's
No,
like
it's
using,
not like using
Yes,
that.
it is.
Like
Randy,
we've
it's
used,
just like,
we budgeted it every year for revenue, every
it
year.
has, and we've come up short some years, Randy. We can't.
But it's not like budget and reserve.
Okay. Play this out. We had the budget. We got a budget.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, we're going to have a windfall of money that somebody just said, we might have this, or we're going to have this. I can't operate like that. I can't, that just don't make sense, guys, to use that money. If anything, that money ought to go into reserve, just like we're going to take that $450,000 extra money we got this year and plugging it right back into the sheriff's rainy day fund, which is what I'm
And
suggesting.
I'd be fine with that.
And next year, if it comes in more, it ought to go in reserve. And then we keep building up the reserve. We got to get to $3-4 million in reserve.
And I can tell you what's changed, I think, since this budget was made. What month was this budget made?
This was submitted July 15th.
Well, I mean, when you actually prepared, it was a month or two. But anyway, the numbers are coming in. The revenue projections are, the more, it's kind of like the tax. We don't really know what it's going to generate till we start collecting it. And like I said, when you go back with the audit committee in March, maybe we can reduce it because it's bringing in more than we thought it was. The jail bed revenue is, based on, now we got 10 or 11 months worth of data, we can make a more educated decision on what it's going to be, not only the rest of this year, but also next year. Now, I don't have a problem with what you're saying, to just assume it's not going to happen and budget what's budgeted in here.
Okay, all right. Let me get, because I think this is a good train of thought here. Maybe it can get us to. Let's just assume a minute we use that extra $250,000. Are we going to share that? Now, you heard the cuts. If we do it, am I assuming that we're going to have a 7% with a 500 kilowatt reduction? We got to get to that first.
I'd
If we can't get there, then we're going to end up with a 10%.
I'd recommend 7% without the exemption. And then if we come back and we can change it in March.
You can't. Andy, it takes, and bear with me, let's say in March we see we're okay. It takes 120 days and a month to advertise it. Now we're up to 5 months, okay? 5 months. And so March, April, May, June, July, August, September and October. We can vote on it in September, maybe, and then on the first calendar month of a quarter. What does that mean? I'm not sure. Is that just any month out of the year?
Any calendar quarter is when it can go into effect.
What's a calendar quarter?
January would be the first quarter.
Okay. April.
July.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's such a lengthy process to this. This is not something you just do overnight. I hear what you're saying, but
We
I'd
don't.
rather cut what we can, and I'd rather be conservative on the revenue than get to March and say, uh-oh, we don't
Why are we going to wait to March? Why don't we look at our budget in
January.
Why wait to March and know we're behind?
Well, I agree. Now, we would need a seasonally adjusted, of course, because people use more power in January for using heat, but
It doesn't even start till January.
at the end of January, What
they're going to have for a quarter. Okay, I'm sorry, Lynn. You've been trying to speak. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I think you raised some excellent points, and I want to follow up a little bit on one of the speakers. One of the things I find frustrating and that I think the public doesn't appreciate is that what a small part of the tax bill we directly control. And it was disappointing to me, for example, to hear that not one citizen, according to the paper, was at the school board hearing when they made decisions about what rates they should charge. And I know right now they're having a hard time because they didn't get some of the federal money. But I'm particularly interested in energy, and I don't think our school district is doing what they need to be doing in terms of energy conservation, switching to alternative fuels for their buses and so forth. So that's one area. The sheriff's office was mentioned, and I think I agree with the speaker who said the sheriff could cut more. In the analysis that Randy referred to, where we looked at how everyone's budgets compared to 2005, 2006, everyone's was lower except for the sheriff's, which was higher. So, I think I really wish we could get the sheriff's office to be more aggressive about trying to find ways to cut. And again, in terms of energy, I've offered suggestions that haven't been followed up. They have a jail. They use tons of hot water. They could do a solar thermal water heater that gets, on a loan if they need to. They can get rebates for it. They can get the payback in 2 to 3 years and then save money from there on forward. They over air condition. I put trees in front of their buildings to try and give them some shade, but they have lots of room just in the energy conservation area. So anyway, I agree, but is everybody sending emails to the sheriff's office? Emails to the school board? They all seem to come to us like we have no control over the school board, and we have very limited control over the sheriff, because it's my understanding, and maybe the attorney can correct me, is when other counties have tried to order the sheriff to make cuts, that's been overruled, and that the sheriff has prevailed on the budget. So maybe I need to do more research, and maybe we need to be tougher on that, as Mike was suggesting. But I do know when we had the sheriff up here and asked him if he could cut the $300 that Mike was asking him to cut, he said no way. And, then if he doesn't pay it and it gets overruled, it comes to us. So, forgive me if we're a little gun-shy about having to look at another $300,000 to cut. Now, with the $250 that the sheriff has now said they're expecting additional in-bed revenue, I would think that if it doesn't come in, that needs to be compensated out of the sheriff's budget. And
It's coming in.
It's a projection.
Projected.
It's a projection, but where we did run into problems, I think, in the past, I think if there's a clear understanding that if your projections aren't good, you need to find it in your budget to make up for that deficit. So anyway, that's enough kind of on general comments, but one more general comment, and I have a specific proposal. It's nobody, not one of us, wants to put any new taxes into place, raise taxes. All of us would love to lower taxes. Where I get frustrated with my colleagues on the board, who I love dearly, truly, but if you say, I'm not going to vote for something because I don't support any new taxes, or because it's not revenue neutral, or because I won't go over another level, unless you show me how you're going to make up the difference in cuts or additional revenue, I think you are shirking your responsibilities and letting the rest of us do the heavy lifting. So, really, you either vote for one of these proposals, or you come up with a viable alternative. And that's what I've tried to do, and I'm sure I know there are actually a couple problems with this, but I'm going to hand those out. There are 2 pages for each of you if you'll pass them down. And the first page, I just put what I thought were some goals that we were shooting for. If we wanted to get to the 7% rate, and this was no exemption, we need to find almost 128,000 in cuts. If we want to get down to the 5%, I had 421 with no exemption in cuts. If we want to lower the millage rate just to 8.5, that's 358,000 in cuts. And then if we wanted to do combinations, which is what I'd really like to do, of going less than 10 on the PST plus also dropping the millage rate, it shows you different numbers. And then I tried on the next page to come up with some ways to fill in those cuts or revenues. And I was including the jail bed in that. That's the second page, because I thought we could hold the sheriff accountable for if it doesn't come in, then he has to make those cuts. And then on the proposed cuts that were not personnel related, many of these were the ones Mike proposed before that I agreed with, although I've been told the Appalachia Regional Planning Council we're required to pay, so that's $7,000 out of that. And then I looked at some hiring cuts, or hiring delays or personnel cuts. And in particular looking at delaying our hiring of bringing on the new county administrator, delaying bringing on the new planning director. I think Tim is doing a great job, and I don't think we can afford to bring David on right now. So those if we delay 3, 6, 12 months, that's what we could save. Planning director, I personally think we need a planning director right now more than a new administrator since we have Tim, but so I probably wouldn't want to go out more than 6 months on that. And I'd rather have the planning director than our other planning tech, so that's a possible position. We lost one planning tech. They both started at the same day. I'd let them both go and hire the planning director instead.
Okay, the planning tech's the only position on here that's currently that you'd be currently employed.
But the person who does the same job and started the same day has already been given notice to leave. The park and rec director, I know that Tim has some ideas of splitting, so we have a rec director and a park and director plus project manager. But this would be a way to kind of save some money by delaying that. And the park and rec employee that we talked about. And then this last one I've been told couldn't happen. I was hoping, we had an employee who was formerly with the property appraiser's office, and since they'd lost an employee, I thought we may be able to transfer 50% or something over there. So that one's out, and that's a 32 that we couldn't recoup. And then, we have hit our really low-paying employees big time, especially in our office, but also the clerk's office with these weekly furloughs. They had the equivalent of 20% pay cuts plus 3% for retirement, and they're going to see health care increases. We keep hearing we're top heavy with administration, so what I was also proposing is that all of our constitutional officers, we and our administrator, if the hiring's not delayed, step up with a voluntary 10% pay cut. I'd like it to be 20 or whatever, but that would get us another almost $62,000. And I think with the errors I had in there, it's not quite 600,000, but that. And a lot of those would only buy us a year. We would still have to continue to find cuts, but for that 600,000, that gets us close to dropping the millage to 8.25 and doing the 7% PST with no exemption. So
I'd like to recommend and Mike, the 500, just so we're talking real numbers, the 500 kilowatt hour exemption basically equates to $3.50 a month, roughly, if it's 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Just to be conservative, I know you don't think I'm conservative, but I am. On the revenue side, I'd like, if we do it at 7%, let's leave out the 250, let's make the additional cuts we need, which is like 127. If the 250 comes in, like you said, we'll put it to reserve. That's fine. We won't, maybe no. I mean, I can't say don't need to put as much next year, but you're right. It should be $3 or $4 million. We're one hurricane away from being in a real jam. Or if something, I think I said this before, if the force main out here on 319 ruptures and washes out 319, we don't have any money to pay for it, to fix it. That's what so I wish, I don't say I wish, but I'd ask you to consider that anyway. Additional cuts, 7% with no exemption, and we're done.
And that's revenue neutral?
No. Well, it is, the way I look at it, it is. Because our revenues, even with this tax, even with the tax, our local revenues are down 1.2 million this coming year versus the year we're in right now. They're reduced 1.2 million. And we have cut 1.1 million. So in my mind, yes.
I understand that, but not in mine. You got to get below the 875 if you want my vote.
All right,
And I don't care how you do it. You just got to get below the 875.
well, I wouldn't even talk about compromising, and I may not, just because if we're going to be so hard-headed, I'll just cast my vote, and that'll be the end of it, and we'll go on. But because I want to try to get something out of this that's going to help the people, otherwise we may walk out here tonight with a 10% PSD or 7% with no exemption.
Yeah, Jerry, seriously, if you don't vote for either the 5 or the 7% option, it's going to be set
might
at
as well vote for the
10%, and it'll be on you.
Now, with that said, I'm not going to, here's where I'll go for what it's worth, and y'all vote like you want. It's 7% with the 500 kilowatt reduction, leave the $250,000 in play, whatever the rest of the cut is, pass it on to everybody. It's not that much.
Are you saying leave the 250
Yes.
in the budget?
Yes.
Well, what was
As
that?
I hate to.
That's fine.
Say that again. I want to make sure.
7%, leave the sheriff's $250,000 in there, and
7% with or without?
with the reduction, with the 500 kilowatt
exemption.
exemption.
How much money does the exemption equate to, Will, over the year, sir?
It's quite a bit of money.
It's $600,000 in there.
Well, if you're looking at 7%, equating to,
It's the difference between 1,135,000 and 829,000. So what is
We're
that,
looking at 9 months.
400,000 roughly?
like 40.
400,000.
That's a lot of money. I mean, that's taxpayers' money.
$229,786.
I can go for that. I'll go for that.
Oh, I was just looking at electric. I'm sorry.
But-
I'm sorry.
When you can't get, I mean, we're not going to get the votes to make it revenue neutral. So
I think, and
I'm
I
going to get
think
the best I can out of it, and that's, is that right? I'm not going to sit up here and vote against it, and then, by golly, have it broke off where the sun don't shine.
And I'm going to be
do it.
like that on the garbage thing. You know, I didn't vote for it initially, but I want to be part of the conversation when we go to talk about it.
I agree.
I can go along with that because I still think our revenue numbers are conservative. I think it'll actually come in higher, and I think we could probably lower it even more when we look at the actual numbers. So I agree with that. More cuts, I agree. That's fine with me, what you suggest.
And I would add to that is if in March we look at this thing and it looks good, I want to then, next budget year, let's just lower ad valorem.
I'm with you. Nobody wants
Up
to
with
tax.
anything else, but just start lowering ad valorem.
None of us, certainly being local politicians, want to tax people because every time we go to Walmart or somewhere, somebody grabs your ear and says, "Why did you?" We got to do this to be responsible, to pay for what people I think expect, and we got to make up for the past. I mean, I'll go with that.
Okay. Alan?
I have, is your plan then to keep the millage at 8 3/4? And again, just because I won't even argue the point anymore. I'll make you the point one more time, but I won't fight it out. I think it makes more sense to charge a higher public services tax and lower the millage rate.
Because you don't care about that 82-year-old grandma out there who's going to start paying taxes, Alan. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Okay. I've just said it one last time.
Okay.
I appreciate it. If we continue to move in this direction of if we end up with more money from the sheriff's department, if revenues keep coming in, one of the things I do think that we should consider that hasn't been talked about in a long time is start talking about maybe looking at an operational audit again for everything. Having experts come in.
As long as it's free.
But we could, the theory behind it is you pay the money and you'll save the money because they'll come in with their genius ideas and say you will save the money because it's...
Sounds like that sewer presentation we heard the other day.
We got shelves full of studies that we've never
We have
used.
to actually implement what they say. So that's a good point. I'm just putting that out there because I can't tell you when I look at the sheriff's department, if we're going to talk about it, I know what they tell me, and I know what I can find out from asking people's questions, but they make a very convincing argument that they need what they have.
Everybody does. And
Everybody does. So you have to bring in someone who understands.
And none of us up here want to have to cut anybody. I want that clear, that I don't want anybody to have to cut, but it is what it is. I'm having to cut my budget at home. I'm doing things different than I used to do, and it's because I make less money, because these robbers are taking my money. These people who call themselves politicians at the national and state level are robbing me blind, and I'm having to pay for it. Well, there you go.
Okay. Would you restate exactly what you're proposing? It's the 7% with the 500 kilowatt hours, and that means we have to. Oh well, I don't know what's needed in cuts. At 300 and no.
229, 786, right?
Well, you got 346, 259 at 7% with the 500 kilowatt exemption.
All right.
And then you're saying include the $250,000.
The 250,000 in there.
Down to 96,259.
Across, and then fairly assess that to everybody, percentage-wise, as a percentage of budget, and then that's how much they'll cut. I want to make, while you're doing that, I want to make sure the public understands, because Randy made a good point when he began, is that in this budget year we're in right now, in the 10-11 budget year, we have cut almost $1.2 million out of the budget. We've done that. The public don't see that, and I know that sometimes you don't see it because you don't see your numbers change. It's who's still taking that money out of my pocket, but we've done that this year, guys. I mean, painfully. We have let a lot of people go in our department. We've done our part. The sheriff's done his part. He did $600,000 worth of cuts. So every constitutional officer did their part. So I'm not up here lambasting them, by no means. But if we do this like this, do I like it? No, but I think it's the best compromise that we can hope for.
Okay, so the 96 will be cut across all the
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Including supervisor elections. We took his on
We can eat his.
last time.
We'll take his.
Okay, so with the exception of supervisor of elections.
I mean, there's been several good ideas about the sheriff lease, that you mentioned that, and I think that's been bounced around. I think, everybody should cut to what their real level needs to be, and, why do people not go to the school board public hearings? I think that they are satisfied that they're getting what they pay for, and that's the point I want us to get to, is that people feel that we're not wasting their money, that we're spending it. And I just got here, but that's
okay. With that, is there? And I know we'll tackle this on the September 6th, but is there any commitment to also try to reduce the millage rate through cuts?
I'll listen to that all day on another level. Yes, if we can collectively come up with a way to cut any amount, a tenth, whatever off the millage rate, I'm fine with that. I think that's a good idea, but I think that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
My whole
goal with this tax is to be able to not have to impact the millage as much.
I'd like us to kind of be in some sort of agreement before we go into the first just public hearing on it. I mean, I guess this was strictly on the PST. I'd like us to be in some sort of agreement on the budget before we, you see what I'm saying? If we're going to do 7% with the 500 kilowatt exemption, then I think we all need to be on board with that, Jerry. I know you're not going to be, but, at least we're in it together. You're still going to get blamed for it, even though you voted against it, just because you're a county commissioner. You're a politician now. Welcome to the... He
may be for it after all. We'll see here when he casts his vote. I hope so, because I agree. I think we need to be unified behind it and march on.
Well,
yes, Ralph, we'll allow you to say something quickly, please.
Last time I looked at the budget, you guys had budgeted $1 million in solid waste, and that was still in the budget that I looked at online last week. And the way I understand it, with Waste Pro coming in, now that takes it off the table. We're not going to have to spend that money. And then also you're getting $250,000 in franchise fees that you're skimming off of the $196 that you charge the taxpayers. And I haven't seen how that's over $1 million that I haven't seen has been addressed.
we can talk about it now, but we can talk about it's later. It's not as easy as that.
The franchise fee money is a different color of money, and we can talk about that, but it doesn't help the general fund in the end is the problem, so.
But it complicates the revenue neutral portion.
The money that was being collected that was budgeted wasn't this money. It was fees from the landfill.
I've agreed with Commissioner Arts twice tonight. We might be on a roll here, but at the 7%, I agree with her. You need to cut the ad valorem, and it doesn't take that much. 8.6. We're at 8.75. You cut the ad valorem at 8 to 8.68, according to my numbers. Now I'm looking at public service tax and communication service tax. That's what I'm basing that on. 8.68 gets us back to revenue neutral. That's not a hard sell. And remember now, all we're talking about is operating on what we gave you last year.
Yeah.
We're not we're not talking about cutting the money out that we're giving you. We're talking about keeping the same money we gave you last year.
And Ralph, for our edification, can you explain to us what revenue neutral means to you? Because there are two counter views of revenue neutral means in Wakulla County.
I understand true revenue neutral looks at all the money that comes in from all sources. I understand that. But from these people out there to pull that voting lever and these people that write that check, revenue neutral to them means what they're paying out.
But for you, revenue neutral means if we brought in $1 last year, we bring in $1 this year.
I'm not looking at the total pot. No, I'm looking at what you're assessing against taxpayers.
Ralph, how would you account then for the $1.2 million in local revenue reductions? Is it important to you at all that we're no longer skimming money off the wastewater and off the solid waste and off the road department?
Every fund should stand on itself.
And the reserve.
And the reserve. So we got to make that money up
I agree
instead
with
of
that.
skimming it off the road. When I ran the road department, it had plenty of money.
Yeah.
And, I was frankly, I guess, surprised when I heard the road department was in trouble because it's gas tax money. It's not ad valorem money. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering, how did it get in trouble? I didn't have anything to do with, I'm not taking credit for that, of course. The board budgeted it, but one of the contributors was the board skimming off the top and using it over here.
That's a problem.
And our direction to the administration was stop doing that. Don't do that anymore. That's why our revenues are down, even with the tax. Our revenues are down 1.2 million, and I'm going to keep hammering on that. And we've made up that difference with cuts.
In fact, we're out of jeopardy now with this budget year, and we've built up a sizable reserve already. And we turned the ship around, and I hear what you're saying.
But part of it, you're raising the tax to build up the reserve. That's like me borrowing money so I can fill up my savings account.
Preaching to the choir.
Yeah, I mean,
we all remember when that auditor was here talking about Columbia County, I think it was, and Swanee. And Jerry, you asked him, and they were in a jam. How did they get out of the jam? Spending cuts, revenue enhancement. The man sat right here and told us how they did it. And that's what we're doing. We got to I don't want to live in a county that's right on the edge of being in financial crisis. I mean, like I said, we could have one thing happen, and we'd be broke, worse than broke.
But I'm not going to argue about it anymore.
I just want to say, though, that I really am committed at our meeting on the 6th to try to reduce the millage rate.
I agree. And I don't.
I mean, you had me persuaded to 5%, even though I didn't see how we were going to get there.
I'm willing to look at all what you're talking about here.
Okay.
I think you're going to have a fight on your hands to get any constitutional officers to volunteer to cut their pay 10%, and that may be another issue.
In our board, someone said we've cut 23%.
With our furloughs.
Well, it's the income. Are you telling me the income of our people in our office is 23% down?
For several months, for much of the summer, yes, absolutely.
Well, basically, my feeling is we ought to share that pain across the board.
Well, I hear you.
Okay.
Well, we don't want to start.
Well, you share that across the board and reduce that and make sure I'm revenue neutral, and I'll vote with you.
I don't want us to start off the year with furlough days. I mean,
no,
that to me it's
no, we're not.
It really
Let's
hurts.
make the budget what it needs to be. This is what the dollar amount needs to be to operate this county, and let's just move on.
All right, I'll ask you one other question. If you want to come back at another time, real short, and reduce this millage rate, if you will say that you will find a way to reduce that millage rate at that next meeting or whenever it may be, real soon, I'll vote with you.
I'm all for lowering the millage rate. I'm
Well,
advocating
don't be for it. That, just tell me that you will
Okay.
do whatever you have to do to reduce that.
I'm going to agree with Commissioner Arts with this one. We've got a whole list of ideas in front of us. If you can come up with ideas that we can agree on how to cut spending, I will support the cut in income.
Well, that's a big statement, if you will, that I can agree. That
Well, it's the same. I mean, I'm telling you where I come from. I mean, like, I'm amazed. Some of the suggestions that Commissioner Arts made are surprising to me.
we had a proposal. We had a proposal from the sheriff, do an audit and whatever, that would save $400,000, and we just stuck it in a back closet.
We've implemented a lot of those suggestions.
Yeah, but did we implement $400,000?
I think we implemented most of it.
Yes, we have, Jerry.
Quite a few of them were also, they didn't have accurate data.
Well, have we put those numbers into our budget?
Yes, that's how we're coming up with some of the $1.2 million cuts we've made.
And I may not agree with these cuts. Personally, I don't think we need to wait 12 months on the administrator. I mean,
Well, I'm just putting, those are just my ideas.
I want an administrator and I want a planning director. I mean,
But what I'd like to see us all do is come. I mean, Ms. Arts has been. She stuck her neck out here. Let's all come back. I came back to the meeting the other night with some ideas, which she got some of them in here. Let's all come back with some genuine ways to cut, Jerry. I mean, you need to ante up to the.
I'm not gonna give my vote up and hope that I get something down the road. I'm just not. I can't do that.
If we cut anything, it may be a tenth of a mil. That's a cut.
Well,
that's what you want to hear.
I want it below 875.
Okay.
Maybe he'll.
I'm absolutely for 8.5 and hope we can get to 8.25.
So we need to go around and talk to all our other people in the county that tax dollars go to and see if they can cut too, not just us, you know.
I agree.
I'm not going to give up the administrator.
Well, that's another conversation for another day, I think. But I agree with the 7%, 500.
I want us all to come with our own sheet of paper.
But we can sort of have
maybe some of them line up. Maybe some of them are ideas I never thought of or you didn't think of. And let's try to cut the millage.
Do you want to schedule an extra budget workshop?
No. We got plenty.
Tuesday's going to be a heck of a meeting. Just putting it out there to have a long conversation about these things.
I'm ready to go all night.
Yep. They used to go
By the way, public, just so you know, we've moved the next, the September 6th BoCC meeting over to the community center, starting at 5 p.m. so that we can make room, anticipating that we'll have a lot of citizen turnout, which I hope we do, because the 6 public hearings that we have most are controversial, and that's okay. We need to hear from the public, and that's where we'll hold it. And we may not allow you to, depending on how many people come, we may reduce the time amount to everybody to speak to 1 minute. We'll see, but we'll get as many people to be able to be heard as we can. Okay.
I tell you.
All right, well, now we need a motion and a second and to vote here, right?
I'll make a motion to set the PST at 7% with the 500 kilowatt hour exemption.
Second.
Hold on a second. You have an ordinance here, so what you need to do is remove section 2 from the ordinance, which is where the 500 kilowatt hour exemption is taken out because it's already in place. So you adopt the ordinance minus section 2.
We left the exemption in.
Well, but that's not in here.
Right.
What we're voting on.
It's supposed to
is
come out,
take it
so you're taking that section out that takes it out.
I make a motion
We're
to
modifying this ordinance before we approve it.
Go ahead, Randy.
adopt the ordinance, taking out the section that,
Section 2.
section 2.
And, okay. Does that make it clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Helen?
Any more discussion?
Helen's not here.
All for the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries 4-1. Thank y'all. And now, just real quick, hopefully we'll address that. We need to, guys. Somebody needs to be prepared to come back and let's talk about how we're going to take care of these guys. Okay.
We're going to save, all of them.
Not really.
Well, we will. Because it went from 10%. We just got to get there.
Oh.
Whatever that percentage needs to be.
I thought the 500 kilowatt hour.
It'll be something less than 10.